In the 22 years since John Kotter wrote his seminal book, Leading Change, organisations have spent billions of dollars on operational transformation and process improvement efforts to achieve sustainable business improvements. However, about two-thirds of these initiatives fail, and as the failure rate has remained stubbornly steady from 1996, when Kotter published his work, to a 2015 McKinsey Global survey, which found similar results. So, we set out to find those people who've been in the trenches for quite some time, and they've been part of the successful minority that have managed to pull off long-term sustained results. Now, CoCreation Partners is a New York-based consulting firm that has a track record of guiding clients to this sustained long-term success. How do we do it? Well, we're going to find out from the likes of Gaurav Bhatnagar and Minukas. They're principals at CoCreation Partners. I'm delighted to say that they've joined me in the studio. Gentlemen, a very good day to both of you. And Gaurav, if I can start with you, we have a growing and evolving business landscape. So why is business transformation so crucial?
Sure, that's a great question. If you think about business transformation, the first thing to think about is that this word transformation is thrown around in the business world all the time without much understanding of what it really means. Fundamentally, the way we think about transformation is how do you deliver truly breakthrough performance by shifting the way leaders and individuals in the organization think, and how do you create an organization which is truly a learning organization and an organization that can create problem-solving culture. Now, why is that important? Which is the question. The reason that's important is because if you think about competitive advantage in the marketplace, in the 90s, it was all about talent. But actually, talent is really easily fungible, and pretty much every organization in the world has very similar around talent. The other thing which was big was information. But with the technology revolution, information is easily available. So the only thing now left for organizations to truly become distinctive is to get maximum performance from their employees. And the way you do it is by getting organizations to move out of what we call a fear mindset into a mindset where people can tap into their unlimited potential and really work from there. And that is, for us, business transformation. And that is what the next 20 years are going to be with the organizations that are going to win in the marketplace. That's what they're going to do.
So what we're talking about basically is inclusiveness, but it has to start from the top to get down to the bottom.
It's inclusiveness, but it's also how do organizations engage their entire workforce to create a learning organization?
Because the problem you often find is a them and us. You've got the guys at the top not really communicating with the guys at the bottom of the food chain.
Yes, of course. Yeah,
yeah. So I think that's a really important point. So one of the things which we have realized in organizations is that communication is one of the biggest challenges in organizations. George Bernard Shaw really interestingly said that the greatest challenge with communication is the assumption that it has happened. And often leaders will say something by email, but it gets translated by these informal leaders in the organization in completely different ways.
And that's the danger of emails, really.
Exactly,
It's the way that we all read into them. But I mean, you talked about communication as being one of the most common issues that you guys come across, but that's just one of many.
Sure.
I mean, what are the other struggles that you find when you go into a company and you're trying to identify where the problems are?
Yeah, I think there's many different levels. We actually talk about it at three different levels. We talk about at the system level, or the IT level, where that's all about the organization's vision, mission, purpose, their goals, their strategies, and that's and also their processes and structures. And that's where a lot of organizations tend to focus their energy. But we also talk about it at two other dimensions, the we level, which is all about the culture and how people relate, how they communicate, how they build trust with people, with each other, and also how they have or don't have difficult conversations. And then we also talk about it at the I level, and that's all about how people individually show up. Do they show up with a victim mindset, feeling like they don't have any choices, or do they show up with a mindset of mastery and feeling like they actually have choice and can do something about their situation? And that applies to leaders as much as it applies to the all the employees in the organization.
Mm-hmm. And just to build on that, I think often organizations get so focused on the it because that's what gets measured.
That the end product.
The end product, but they fundamentally forget that what drives the end product is the individuals and how individuals engage with each other. And often operational transformations become all about the process, which is important.
Yeah.
But without really thinking about the individuals who are driving the process, you don't get the sustainable results, which is why the Kotter study still holds true today.
Because there is this assumption on some managers that we come up with the plan,
Yes.
and you guys, the ones below us, it's your job to execute the plan, and if it doesn't go right, if we don't hit the target, then the fault lies with you, not us.
And what that leads to then is a lot of fear down in the organization, and people are actually get even more defensive. And rather than looking at things which are challenging them as something that allows them to learn and grow, they go into their comfort zone and say, I'm not going to do anything.
And presumably it can also contribute to a company churn as well, that if people feel that they're being in some way victimised, it's like, you know what, I'm not going to stay here because I'm not appreciated. I'll go and leave and take my talents elsewhere.
Yeah, and the churn that's an interesting concept because we actually, in our view, fear is one of the biggest sources of waste in an organization. And fear can manifest itself in a lot of different ways. So churn is one way in which it manifests, where people just run away from the company because they just it's not resonating with them, and it can manifest in a lot of different ways as well.
And the interesting idea is victimization is an interesting word, right? It's the idea that we try and push in organizations, because it's a really important idea, is no one can victimize you. It's your choice whether you show up as a victim or not. And how do you get people to shift out of bad things are happening to me into a place of things are happening, now what choices do I want to make to move forward? And how do you create a system in an organization so that they can do that versus get stuck in, oh, it's his fault or her fault or my whatever, all that stuff that goes on, whether in your personal situations or your work situations, is what we need to overcome.
Which quite nicely leads to my next question, because look, you've identified all these problems, and let's face it, most organisations, regardless of how big or small they are, they have encountered them. So how do you get in there and address these things? Because it's a bit of a step for a corporation which feels it's doing very well to actually hold its hands up and say, okay, we've got a problem here, you guys, come on in. Where do you start?
Yeah. So, do you want to go? Do you want me to go?
Go for it.
So here's the interesting thing. The first thing which the conversation we have is that the average life of an organization is no more than 30 years, right? It's interesting that it's no more than 30 years.
It's quite scary, really, isn't it?
So what often organizations do is they get to a point where they say we are best practice. And the moment you get into best practice, you fall into complacency. And our question always is, what is your next practice? What is your next practice that you're going to get to? Because if you don't, someone else down the street is going to get there, right? And so the approach that we take is that, as Mark talked about, it, we, and I, we flip it on its head and we go, first we want to work with you on the I level, leaders, formal leaders in the organization, informal leaders in the organization, and we want to shift the way you think, shift your mindset in terms of what attitude you show up with. Then we have a conversation on a we level, which is, now that I think differently, how do I engage with people around me differently? And then, only then, which is very different from traditional consulting models, we look at the it stuff, which is about what shifts that need to happen from this new way of thinking. And when you do that, what happens is you increase the probability of success from about 30%, which is the Kotter number, to, in our experience, about 80 to 90%. But you also make it sustainable because people are committed to being different versus are complying to be different.
But what fascinates me is that there are many companies who would turn around and say, well, we're doing very well, we're reaching our growth targets, we're satisfying our shareholders, so we don't need you. So there has to be a point at which a company says, look, something isn't quite right.
I think most business leaders that we interact with intuitively understand that culture is a really important part of what they need to do. And they may feel like they're achieving their goals right now, but there's some real uncertainty about the future. And so I think we talk to a lot of people where they know they need to work on culture, and so it's more about just getting into the work with them and showing them through the work that there really is an opportunity.
And there are two kinds of organizations that we end up working with. One is an organization that has a real challenge, that they've done pretty well, but now they're either at a plateau where they're not growing, or there's something that's going down. Or we work with organizations where the leaders are slightly more thoughtful and enlightened, and they recognize that, to keep growing, there's something missing. And so it's one of those two type of leaders that often work with us, right? Where there's a real challenge, or there is a yearning to understand that there's something more that you can always aspire for.
But obviously you need to have people at the top
Yes.
who are willing to recognise
Yeah.
that they need to move forward.
Yeah.
Is that a generational thing? Is that perhaps are younger managers more inclined towards that line of thought than perhaps older managers?
It's an interesting question. I don't think I've really thought about it from a generational perspective. I think any leader who's really concerned about the performance of their organization now or in the future is thinking about how culture or the human dimension of their organization will allow them to achieve those goals. So I see that in young people, and I see that in people from older generations as well.
Interesting. And the other point which springs to mind, of course, is that, look, there are quite a few companies that say, yeah, we do this, we get what you're doing, we understand it, it makes sense. But clearly, you guys are doing something that's very different. Mm-hmm. What gives you the edge above the other practitioners in this field?
Sure. So so the reason why we are different is because we bring a unique combination of technical expertise along with the tuning in to the people side of things. So there are organizations out there that only focus on the, dare I say, the more touchy-feely, eye-level people stuff, but they don't have the sense of how do you create shifts in a system.
So looking at the thing as a whole.
Yeah,
as
so
opposed
those
to
are the
just
more
bits of it.
boutique firms. Then there are these large organizations that look at the big picture, but they're not really good at working with leaders at a really deep level to bring the shifts happen. What we have done is brought these two ideas together, and we're probably one of very few organizations that holistically can do both sides and bring it together in a systemic way that allows for organizations to actually go on a journey which feels holistic and complete versus, let's do something kind of thing.
But at some point you have to stop holding their hands. At
Yes.
what point do you feel confident that you can actually let go and it's like, okay, you can walk the path, you don't need us anymore?
So
We
go
start
ahead.
letting go from day one. So it's it's sort of the essence of the work that we do is in our name. It's CoCreation Partners. So we every step of the way we're co-creating with the clients. We're not just giving them answers. So you asked a question earlier. What do we do? How do we convince people that there's an opportunity there? We don't come in and do a big diagnostic and a big study and say here's the answer and here's your implementation plan. We're actively working with the leaders and employees to come up with their own solutions. And so it's a very active, co-creative process that builds sustainability in from day one.
And let's look at the results, because obviously it does work. That's why you're here. That's why you built up a very good, strong client list. So in terms of gauging the benefits that it brings to the client and improving performance, how would you assess that?
So we assess performance at multiple levels, but the fundamentally the way we assess success is right up front in an engagement. We ask our clients, what is the business impact you're trying to create? Not how engaged the employees are and all of that stuff, because that's a step in the process. So it's either business growth, it's either certain revenue targets or profit targets and things, or retention rates, employee retention rates and stuff. So all the successes we've had have always led to tangible business outcomes that can be directly related to the work we've done. It's almost impossible to do a regression equation to it, but our clients will tell you that if it wasn't for the work, they would not have hit those business targets. We worked with a chemical manufacturing company where they set out for a target of savings of the order of about $15 million or so, which is what the other consultant, and they ended up with about 60 million.
Yeah.
And it was like, and it was all the employees coming up with the ideas. So it's not even, because what we did was we tilled the soil for the ideas to emerge, and then the employees just took over.
But I am fascinated, though, about identifying what a company's needs are, because every company has different needs. So, and a company could say, "Look, this is our problem, we need you to help us deal with it." but they could be totally wrong. The area that they've identified as a weakness could actually be a burgeoning strength, whereas the strength is a weakness because there's something in it which perhaps they haven't noticed.
Sure. So what, again, as Mark said, it's a co-creative process, right? So it's not like they just tell us and we just do it. What we'll do is we'll go talk to them, we'll look at what's going on in their business practices and so on and so forth. And then what we do is we bring everyone into a room and we do something called a mirror session, where we'll put everything up on the wall. And then we say, we are mirroring back to you. This is not just what you told us, but this is our thinking. And now let's together come up with where are the big priority areas. And not only 5 years down, but in the next 6 months, what are the things that you need to make to work on? So it's a very engaging and yet challenging process. And often people feel exhausted and yet exhilarated at the end of this conversation, because it's not that we are just giving an answer and they're just reacting to it. They are now being faced with the reality, and now they have to have in dialogue with each other around it.
And one thing we're trying to do as well, or help organizations do, is build a learning organization. So regardless of their chosen strategy, we're helping them achieve that strategy, but building that muscle. So if their strategy does change, their culture is strong enough to help them achieve that new strategy.
And I'm glad you've used the word culture as well, because it's looking at human need, but against the culture of a company. How can the two things be fused together almost seamlessly so that they work, they complement each other? On the surface, they do seem very different.
Well, so few thoughts on that. One is that organizations don't transform, humans do. And when the critical mass of human beings transform, the organization transforms by itself. So the culture of an organization is nothing but the collective of the human beings, right? So it's not different. The other thought is what we do often, one of the other things we do prior to doing this mirror session is we create with the leaders of the organization what we call the cathedral story. Or what is that beautiful picture of this amazing thing that you're trying to create as an organization, not just your day-to-day targets. So they collectively define this vision, which includes the culture in it, or what is that thing that is truly exciting for us to move towards. So what we're doing is we're building the excitement of the organization up front before we face them with this challenge. And when we do it together, suddenly they start recognizing what are the cultural challenges and what are the human needs that need to be addressed in order for the cultural challenges to be addressed.
In terms of this approach to clients, is there one standard formula that you guys use, or is it something which evolves according to what the client's needs are?
I would say it absolutely evolves with the client needs. So that's why our first question is always, what are your business objectives? And we'll tailor a program to help a company meet those objectives, but there are common patterns that we do tend to apply. So Gaurav mentioned that we do start with mirror sessions. We focus on the I dimension, so how people are showing up and how they work together, so the we dimension and how they build trust with each other, and then we help them design the whole system and do process improvement.
Yeah, and I think the other part of it is if we are trying to create learning organizations with our clients, our fundamental value for us is that we have to be, so we have certain things we say are sacred. So for us, learning is sacred. And if we come with a standard formula, then learning cannot be sacred. So we have a fundamental structure that we start with, but then it evolves. The other thing we say for ourselves as an organization is challenge is sacred. So we need to challenge each other to constantly test whether what we're doing, we're not falling into our trap of, here's the solution, this is what you all do. And sometimes clients get challenged by that. They say, hey, we got you in because you've done this before and you just need to apply it. So one of the first conversations has to be that, yes, we want to apply it, and you are different from any other client we worked with. So it needs to evolve based on what your needs are.
And I want to develop this as well, because normally whenever we hear about these management consultancies going in with different companies, it's almost like a teacher-child relationship. I'm telling you what to do. This is what you do. This is what you need. And what you guys are doing is, look, here is a problem. Let's deal with it together. And how do clients react to that? Because there does seem to be a mood in the business world that you bring in people to tell you what to do. Give me the template and I'll follow it. Now go away, please. And here you are saying, no, we're going to be completely different. We're creating something together.
Yeah.
How do they react?
Mark?
I think clients react in different ways. I think for some people it's a breath of fresh air, and they're like, oh, finally, we can, we're not being told what to do by consultants, but we're actually being asked to think for ourselves, and it feels collaborative. I think other people feel very anxious about it because they're looking externally to, for an answer, and if that's what they're looking for, that's not us. But I would say, most organizations have it within themselves to come up with their own solutions, and so we help create the structures and the environment where people can show up at their best, and the organization can become higher performing.
And therefore, our role is as much being facilitators as being consultants. And that's a really important point. We are facilitating the transformation, we are not doing the transformation. And so sometimes we have to walk away.
Are you facilitators or disruptors?
We are facilitators of disruption. because people feel fearful with disruption. So our work is all about how do you get people to step into that disruption in a way that they feel excited by it versus they feel nervous about it.
Yeah, and so why do we have this approach as well? I can talk just real quickly about my own journey, but I used to be that consultant who came in and gave the answers. I've got an engineering background and process improvement background, and it was all about I'll do the analysis, I'll give you the answer, I'll give you the implementation plan, and you just need to go off and do it. And I learned over time that that's just not effective. Even if people ask for the answer and they think they want the answer, it's not effective because people aren't committed to that solution. And so I've learned over time that the human dimension is really a critical piece of whether the results are achieved or not. And so people need to be involved in that process, and they need to come up with their own solutions with help, with facilitated help, but they need to come up with their own solutions if they're really going to be committed to the way forward. And
Mark and I were just talking that, yesterday he was in a workshop and the clients came grunting and groaning about, hey, it's going to take one whole day to do this and whatever. So there are times when that happens, but as they participate, the process of participation makes them start getting so excited that now they're committed to doing 2 more days of the same work because they realize that's so much more powerful than someone putting up a PowerPoint presentation and saying, this is what you do, this is what you do, this is what you do. And then no one does it because there's no ownership behind it. Okay. The dialogue has not happened.
Well, look, you guys are clearly blazing a trail. So let's say, for argument's sake, that we're here in 5 years' time. We're talking about the company. What will CoCreation Partners be doing in 5 years' time? How will it look?
Do you want to? Okay. So the answer that I gave is that we would be touching 100,000 people a year across organizations in terms of the way they think. And the reason I talk about it that way is because I believe that organizations are the leading edge or the tip of the arrow for the transformation of the world, because organizations are more influential than even governments are. So for us, we will be at a point where we'll be at really, really powerful critical mass in being able to touch 100,000 people, and through that we will be driving transformational change, irrespective of whatever business problem we are trying to solve. Because fundamentally, what we're doing is we're creating learning, or a mindset of learning, and a mindset of problem solving, which can be applied to anything. That's what we're trying to do.
I think you'll get there.
Oh, we are. That's no question about that.
Yeah, the only thing I might add is I think we want to create a real conversation in the corporate world about, it's not just about the technical solutions, it's really about the human dimension. That's a critical piece. I think a lot of people are focused on technological change and automation, and that's the wave of the future. I think over time, the human dimension will be as important, if not more important, because of all the disruption that's happening in the world.
And that's so good to hear from Mark, my technical friend.
I'm sold.
Gentlemen, we've got to leave it there. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and good luck with everything you do in the future. Hopefully, we have a date in 5 years' time.
Hey, thank you.
Looking forward
it's been
to
a
it.
real pleasure.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.